everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to show you how to crochet the spiral flower coaster. They're a lot of fun to make, and the neat thing about them is they're a little bit bigger than your average size coaster. They measure about 5 inches across. I'm going to be making one in yellow today, so I have a set of 6 to give as a gift. Now these are super easy to make, and I've designed the pattern in cotton yarn. If you want to make them in acrylic, you certainly can. Just keep in mind that cotton is absorbent and works great for cups or glasses that are going to sweat. If you're just going to use them maybe for decoration, maybe place markers, or just for a cup of coffee that's not going to sweat, then acrylic is just fine and it will protect your surface as well. This is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the note underneath this video. So what you're going to need to make some of the spiral flower coasters is some cotton. I used peaches and cream and several different colors. You can use just about any of the cottons that are out there as long as it is a medium number 4 cotton. Now you can use acrylic like I stated earlier if that is your preference. Make sure it is a medium number 4. We're going to be stitching today with our H hook, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle for weaving in your ends, and then you'll also need 1 stitch marker. We're going to be stitching in the round. There's no joining, and so we'll need to mark our rows. If you don't have a stitch marker, I'll show you another technique that you can use using another piece of yarn that works just fine. And then, of course, the last thing you need is your scissors. We're going to begin with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 3 chains. Now we're going to place 8 half double crochets in the 3rd chain from the hook. So yarn over, 1, 2, 3, we'll go in that chain, yarn over, and pull through all 3 of those loops. That's our half double crochet. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that tail out of the way, 6, 7, and 8. Let me count to make sure I've only stitched 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, now we're not going to be joining. We're going to continue working around in a spiral, and we're going to be working in the back loops. But we want to mark our rounds around so we know how many we've done. Here's my stitch marker. I'm going to put it right in that last stitch of the row. That way, each time I come around, I can move that up and know where the end of my row or round is. Now, if you don't have a stitch marker, you can use another piece of yarn and just take that piece of yarn and lay it in there so that you know that that's the last stitch of that row, and to begin stitching the next row in the next stitch. All right? I'll leave it there for this next row so that you understand, then I'll take it out on the next. All right, let's do row 2. In row 2, we're going to stitch 2 half double crochets in each stitch, but we're not going to be using our top loops. We're going to be using what's called the 3rd loop. So if you look on the back, here are those 2 top loops, and we're going to be stitching in this loop back here. Yarn over, loop 1, loop 2, or loop front and loop back, and then we're going to go in that next loop, which is called the 3rd loop, and stitch 2 half double crochets. 1 and 2. Alright, let's do the next one. Here's our next half double crochet. Here's our front loop, our back loop, and we're going to stitch in this 3rd loop. Yarn over, go in that 3rd loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 3. And what you'll see forming is it'll look like those 2 top loops are just floating around the top. Alright, here's those 2 loops, the front and the back, and we're going in this 3rd loop. And stitching 2 half double crochets. Yarn over, there's my 3rd loop, 2 half double crochets. And see how that begins to pop out and look like it's floating on the top? Alright, one more time. Here's our front loop, our back loop, and back here is our 3rd loop. Alright, so we're going to go in that 3rd loop and stitch 2 half double crochets. Now we're to the last stitch, because here's our stitch marker, and we'll go ahead and pull that out, stitch our 2 last stitches, then we'll put our stitch marker in the last stitch that we made. Now if you're using a piece of yarn as your stitch marker, just take that piece of yarn and wrap it over. That'll tell you the next stitch is the first stitch on the next row. Alright, and you can see there's our spiral, spiraling around, and you'll know that you found the 3rd loop if you have that little braid or the 2 loops looping around. Alright, and that's the way that row 2 should look. Alright, let's do row 3. Now, for the remainder of the coaster, except for the trim, we'll be stitching in that 3rd loop, and we'll be stitching half double crochets. Yarn over, we're going to go in this first 3rd loop of our first stitch, and stitch 2 half double crochets. 1 and 2. Now we're going to go in the next stitch. Here's our front post, our back post, and here's our 3rd loop. We'll stitch 1 half double crochet, and then we're going to repeat this all the way around. 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, and 1 half double crochet in the next, always working in our 3rd loop. And just to show you again, here's our front loop and our back loop, and then behind that is another loop right there, and that's that 3rd loop. And working in that loop is what gives this coaster its spiral look with that braid sitting on top. Alright, so we're going to continue to repeat 2 half double crochets in the next, 1 in the next, 2 and 1, always working in that 3rd loop. And you'll know you're doing it right if that braid of those 2 loops, it looks like a braid, is on the top. One half double crochet in the next, and 2 half double crochets in the next, working all the way till we get back to where we marked our stitch. All right, so now I'm in that last stitch where I have my stitch marker. I'll stitch my last half double crochet, then I'll take my stitch marker and move it up to the last stitch, and that tells me that's the last stitch on that row, and my next stitch is going to be the first stitch on my next row. If you're using the yarn to mark your rows, you just lay it across there, and that tells you that was your last stitch, and your next stitch is the first stitch on the next row. On row 1, you had 8 half double crochets. On row 2, we have 16. And then on row 3, we have 24 half double crochets. Make sure you mark your row with your stitch marker or your piece of yarn. And now we're ready for row 4. And again, we're stitching in that 3rd loop. Yarn over and stitch 2 half double crochets in that first half double crochet, and then we're going to stitch 1 half double crochet in the next 2 half double crochets, and remember, we're always stitching in that 3rd loop. And what we're going to do on row 3 is we're going to put 2 half double crochets in 1 half double crochet, and then 1 half double crochet in the next 2, and repeat that around. So we're to our next stitch, and we're stitching 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, and then 1 half double crochet in the next 2. And remember, if you're placing your stitch in the right spot, you'll see that spiral that looks like a braid right on top. So let's repeat. 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, and 1 half double crochet in the next 2. And repeat. Two, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. There we go. My stitch was a little tight on that one. I completed row 4, and I moved my stitch marker to the last stitch on row 4. And on row 4, you should have 32 half double crochets. All right, so now we're going to do our last row of spiral stitches. So we'll go to the next stitch and stitch 2 half double crochets, again working in that 3rd loop. And then we'll stitch 1 half double crochet in the next 3 half double crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And again, we are stitching in that 3rd loop. Now we'll stitch 2 half double crochets in the next, and 1 half double crochet in the next 3. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So our repeat is 2 half double crochets in the next and 1 half double crochet in the next 3, working in that third loop. So there's our 2 half double crochets in the same stitch, and then 1 half double crochet in the next 3. So there's 1, 2, and 3. 2 half double crochets in the next stitch, and 1 half double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, and 3. And again, we'll continue that repeat 2 and 3 all the way back around till we reach our stitch marker. I've completed that 5th row, and you should have 40 half double crochets on your 5th row. Alright, so now we're going to take our stitch marker out. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to finish this off. If you don't want to do the trim, then just do these next 2 steps and you'll be done. But if you want to do the trim, we'll do these next 2 steps and then I'll show you how to do the trim. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stitch a single crochet in the next stitch, still working in that 3rd loop. So we'll stitch a single crochet. Then we'll stitch a slip stitch, still working in that 3rd loop. And that just brings the spiral down so that you can weave that in when you're done. All right, now if you don't want the trim on it, now you've got just a nice spiral coaster. Like I said, if you don't want to do this next little loopy trim, you can tie off and weave in your end. But if you want to have this nice little edge, and that's what I think makes it look like a flower, I'll show you how to do that real quick. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. We'll skip the next stitch and we'll slip stitch in that 3rd loop of the next stitch. Chain 3, skip the next stitch and slip stitch in the 3rd loop of the next stitch. Chain 3, and this is what gives us those little loopy things that make it look like a little flower. One, 2, 3, skip the next and slip stitch in the next, and we'll do this all the way around our coaster till we get back to where we started. And isn't that cute? It just gives it a nice little edge, so it does look like a spring flower. So I'll continue working that around until I reach back over here, and then I'll show you how to tie off. So I've stitched all the way around for that trim. I'm back to where I started, and I'm just going to slip stitch right in that same stitch where we started our trim. Going to cut that off, tie that off, and then use my needle to weave that in. Take it to the back and just weave this in. And here's my spiral flower coaster. Now I have a complete set of 6, and it's going to fit my favorite cup perfectly.